Commissioner Henna Virkkunen, it's great to have you on DW. Thanks very much. We appreciate your time. You have just unveiled the European Commission's action plan on drone security and counter-drone security. Before you tell us exactly what that is, could you just start by telling us about what has necessitated such an action plan? Why is it needed?
We have really seen that that kind of drone operations, they are part of how our hybrid threats we are facing nowadays, and especially when it comes to military and defense side. Now there's a lot of activities going on in different member states, and member states are now investing heavily to drone capacity and anti-drone capacity. But this action plan is really complementing the work what military side is now doing, because we have seen also that often the cases when we are facing hybrid threats based on drones, they have been around civil infrastructure, so critical infrastructure, our airports, ports, energy supply infrastructure. So that's why it's important that now we are really also combining different actions, that private sector, who is often owner of the critical infrastructure, our civilian authorities, and also military, that we are looking together, that how we are able really to identify and detect and also eliminate the drones if needed. So better information sharing using new technologies and really to work together.
But could you actually say a little bit more about or define these hybrid threats? You're talking about civilian infrastructure. Exactly what is going on with drones and how are they posing a threat to security in Europe?
We have seen that drones, they have been overflying around different infrastructures, for example, and they have been causing massive also losses around the airports, for example, because of course it's very risky when there's drones flying over the airports, and it has meant that many airports, they have been cancelling hundreds or even thousands of flights because of this reason during the last months. So of course we have to be able really to detect and also eliminate those drones which are really posing risks, for example, for the aviation.
You talk about the ability to detect those drones. That, as I understand it, is a big component of the action plan that you've unveiled. How will Europe get better at detecting these drones in the action plan as you see it?
Yes, we see that it's very important that now we are looking how we can use the current technologies, for example 5G networks, and also our sensors there. And that's why we are also now launching a call for interest for those stakeholders who are willing to participate, really, that we can test also these technologies, that how we can also detect drones better by using, for example, our mobile networks. And also then we have to be able also to share information, of course, when needed, and also support each other if there's that kind of incidents we see, that there's risks for incidents. So using new technologies, better information sharing, and also testing and also practicing together.
Commissioner, you sort of alluded to it there, but in the war in Ukraine, we've seen how drones have essentially become a game changer, and Ukraine's become one of the biggest, if not one of the most prominent drone producers currently. Do you want to see Europe become a drone producer to that effect as well? Is that also part of perhaps competitiveness as well as security?
We see that, of course, it's nowadays a very important part of warfare, that you have drone capacity and also anti-drone capacity. And of course here we have to really learn what Ukraine has done in this field. We see that Ukraine is very effective in drone production, and also the technologies, they are developing very fast, and the innovation cycle has become faster and faster. So Ukraine is a very key partner for us when we want to build our own capacity in both in drone capacity but also in anti-drone systems.
And just the final point on drones, are we going to see more regulation in the civilian use of drones as you seek to counter the threat that these drones could pose?
Yes, it's also part of this action plan, because the drones technology, it has been developing very, very fast. And currently there is a rule in the European Union that uses to register the drones which are more than 250 grams. But now the proposal is that in the future all drones which are over 100 grams should be registered, because now they can also pose serious risks if they are used wrongly.
Commissioner, I want to move on to another part of your portfolio here, and if we can talk about digital sovereignty for a little bit. I just want to read you the testimony of one judge at the International Criminal Court. The US government recently put sanctions on some judges at the ICC. This judge said her bank account was gone, her credit card stopped working, she couldn't even buy a book online. She goes on to say that the US has the power to effectively erase a person from the modern economy. In the realm of digital sovereignty, this happened to this judge because the United States essentially controls all of the big tech that we use around the world, but especially here in Europe. Is it time for Europe to now decouple from US big tech?
What we have said already a long time is that Europe has to really build up our own capacity in all critical sectors. And especially when we look technologies, we see that AI, semiconductors, also quantum technologies, these are very key technologies where we have to have our own capacity, as well as cybersecurity technologies. And we are working on that. So it's very important that we have our own capacity, but that we have trusted partners here, that in all situations we are also able to act ourselves, but that we can always also choose with who and how we are operating, that we are not dependent on one solution, one company, one third country. But of course, this is not happening overnight, because Europe has been always very open for global investors, and our industry is also having very long global value chains. So of course, now we have seen also that kind of dependencies, they can be weaponized against us. And that's why it's important to have own capacity, that you are not dependent on one solution.
Right, so is that effectively a yes to my question when I ask, should Europe now decouple from big tech in the United States?
Big tech is a very important part of our tech ecosystem, and I think USA and big tech will be also in the future a very important part of our economy. But in the same time, we have to always look at where we have risks and do we have alternatives, that we are not dependent on one solution. Like you were telling about, I think this very worrying example we have in Europe, and I think it has been really a wake-up call for many citizens and governments also, that in that kind of situation, that what kind of many dependencies we have, that we should have also alternatives, that we are not dependent on one solution.
I mean, you speak of alternatives, you speak of governments realizing this vulnerability that we have. We know that the government in France has just announced that it would no longer be using platforms like Teams and Zoom for official government businesses. It's now government business. It's now opting for locally developed platforms, so to say. We hear Germany might follow suit. Is it time for Europe to have a Europe-wide, an EU-wide plan that says we don't use US tech for official business?
We are using a lot of USA tech, of course, for the businesses every day. But it's important to boost really also European alternatives in this field, because we see that we have huge potential in Europe. So we have thousands of startups who are developing new technologies, and we have also very strong technologies in Europe, but often they are smaller companies, so they are not so known and visible maybe. And that's why I think, for example, that it's important to use actively public procurement, for example, to boost homegrown technologies and innovations. So currently I'm also preparing a technology sovereignty package, and it will be adopted around the Eastern time, and it will really combine, we will include Cloud and AI Development Act, really to boost investments also to European cloud alternatives there. And also we will have Chips Act 2.0, really to boost also design and manufacturing the most advanced chips in the European Union. And also open source strategy will be an important part of this tech sovereignty package, because we see that via open source we can also give a great boost for our homegrown technologies. So this is something that I'm very much encouraging, of course, all the governments and public administrations who are using public money to buy ICT products, really to look how they can also boost innovations with the public procurement.
Yeah, except, as you point out, there's a lot of potential in Europe. You talked about the very vibrant startup community that is in Europe, except at some point these very businesses flee Europe because they get throttled with regulation, and quite frankly they can't develop further.
It's true that Europe has to become faster and easier and simpler for the businesses, and we are very committed in the European Commission really to simplify our rules and make it easier for the businesses also to comply with our rules, because I agree that we have a lot of rules and some of them are very overlapping and difficult to comply, and that's why we have proposed already 10 omnibuses on different legislations, and also in digital field we have proposed our first simplification package, and now I'm working on the next one. So we will continue this work really to simplify the rules, make it easier, faster for the businesses to operate in Europe. But of course we have to also create better single market. So we often have too much barriers between the member states, and also we have to be able to have capital markets also, because there is also too many barriers. So these are often the really obstacles what our businesses are identifying, that it's too difficult to scale up businesses in Europe, and also to really get enough access to markets because of these obstacles, and we are working on this.
Right. Just in the realm of how you're trying to develop local industry, you talked about the tech sovereignty plan as well, in addition to digital sovereignty. Will that ultimately lead to Europe having its own version of a Silicon Valley?
I think we have many potential Silicon Valleys in the European Union, and that is something that it's a great, I think, strength for us. For example, when we are looking AI, we have almost 8,000 companies who are developing and training AI in Europe, often small companies, and for them it's very crucial that they should be able to really scale up their businesses in Europe, and that's why we have to create the better single market to have better access to financing for them. And currently now we are preparing something called the 28 regime, especially for those innovative small companies, that they can operate under one regime in the European Union, really to give better opportunities for our homegrown technologies to scale up their businesses in Europe. So we have huge potential.
Commissioner, I really feel like I'm raining on your parade here, but you talk about artificial intelligence. The hard truth is that Europe isn't a player in the AI race. This is a race that's dominated by the United States and China. Europe's nowhere near these two big powers as it pertains to the AI race.
But then again, we have to build to our own strengths when it comes to AI, and I see that we have many strengths. I mentioned already that we have thousands of startups who are developing and training AI, but they have a big obstacle because they don't have enough computing capacity in the European Union. So there's demand for 6 times more computing capacity that we have now, and that's why together with our member states we have decided to invest to 19 AI factories, so very big supercomputers, because then we can open up this computing capacity for our startups, for our companies, also for our researchers, because now there's huge demand because of AI for computing capacity, and that is something that we haven't had enough because we don't have that kind of big tech in Europe who could really run that kind of systems. But now with the member states we have decided we are investing to AI factories, and in 1 year time we will have much more computing capacity than we have today.
With this technology, it's developing so quickly. So presumably one of the problems you have in Europe is how long everything takes. As you use the phrase, these things don't happen overnight, except you kind of need them to, right? Because of how fast the technology is developing. Nobody's waiting around for Europe to catch up, so to say. Are you satisfied with the pace at which some of the things that you're outlining are happening? Because on the ground, businesses, innovators, there's a huge sense of frustration there that it just takes too long and that Europe hasn't moved fast enough in this realm.
Of course, when we are, for example, building computing capacity, it takes some months before we will have it. But what we want to accelerate now really is also the uptake of AI, because only 20% of European businesses were using AI in the last year. So, of course, this is also something where I see that Europe can be very strong when we are combining AI with our traditional industries, with the robotics, with our energy industry, with our healthcare. And here we are now really supporting our key sectors also to uptake AI, because there I see also that many of our businesses, they have been quite slow.
There's also the aspect of regulation. We've seen the European Union dish out some hefty fines to some US big tech, looking at, for instance, the chatbot Grok developed by Elon Musk. There was a report on TikTok just recently And this is in a world where you have an administration in the White House, the Trump administration, that is accusing Europe of discriminating against big tech. I want to get your sense, if you could speak to what is it that Europe's trying to achieve, right, in terms of how strict you are with the regulation with big tech here.
Yes, why we have these rules in the European Union, it's something that we want to make sure that we have same rules offline and online. So it can't be that in internet you can do whatever. So what is, for example, illegal in our societies, it's also illegal online. And this is like very clear rules under our Digital Services Act. So we want to make sure with our rule book that we will have a fair and democratic and safe environment also online. So, because we see that these technologies, they are playing bigger and bigger role in our everyday lives, in our economies, and it can't be that they are just playing with their own rules. Of course, they have to respect our legislation, our values, our rules when they are operating in Europe. And we have same rules for everybody, so same rules for European businesses or Asian or USA businesses, so same rules for everybody who is doing business in Europe.
So you're not going to stop with that, despite the pressure coming in from the White House and how this is being used, for instance, in trade negotiations?
Europe is, of course, having our own sovereign right to set our own rules in Europe. And I see also that these digital rules, for example, Digital Markets Act, where we want to make sure that the very big players, the gatekeepers, they are not blocking new innovations from the markets. Or Digital Service Act, that the illegal products and content has to be taken down. These are very clear obligations in the European Union, and there's very strong commitment among our citizens to these rules. So we are protecting and enforcing these rules.
Talking about rules, there's the aspect of social media. We've seen Australia become the first country in the world to effect an outright ban on the use of social media for children under the age of 15. Do you see Europe going in a similar direction? We've heard announcements from a number of member states, but do you see the Commission developing a plan that essentially presents a framework for all EU countries in this realm?
Protection of minors online is a very important priority for us. And I think, first of all, we have to really make sure that online environment, it should be safe for everybody. But especially it has to be safe for minors, because we see that digital world is a very important part of nowadays world and life. And of course also kids, they have also the rights, children has also rights to be in contact, also to get information. And of course we have to make sure that online world is safe for them. And that's why we have our Digital Services Act. We are setting very clear obligation for the online service providers that when minors are using the services, very high level of security, safety and privacy has to be ensured. And now we are currently investigating these very large online platforms, that how they are checking the age of the user, because according to their terms and conditions, users should be at least 13 years old. And if the users are between 13 and 18 years old, of course then very high level of protection of minors should take in place. So now we are investigating also them, that how they are taking their responsibilities here. But we are also aware, of course, and following the discussion in different member states, where many member states, they see that 13 years is even too young to access to online platforms, the social media platforms. There is discussion about 14, 15 or 16 years. And it's competence of member states to set that kind of age limits. But of course, when we look our digital markets, it would be better to have common approach. So that's why also in the European Commission, we are now working to also see that how we could also have European solution for that.
Yeah. And just to bring our conversation to a close, Commissioner, if you could maybe just give us a bit of take us into your imagination, if you will. Where do you see the European Union, perhaps in 5 years' time, as it pertains to digital and tech sovereignty? Will we have more big tech in Europe? Will the stock exchange, for example, the top 10 companies have more sort of tech and digital companies in it? Just give us a sense of what the ambition is, what people can sort of picture and have in mind as you see it.
Yeah, when it comes to technologies, my main goal is boost innovations and investment in this side. It would be great to have also bigger European champions in technologies, but especially I'm really much looking to have that kind of atmosphere that our startup companies, that they can scale up their businesses in Europe and they can be also globally successful. And of course it means also that we have also better security and resilience, and we don't have that kind of risky dependencies that we have just like one very dominant company who is very much operating in Europe. So that we have alternatives, and we have also very lively and fair competition and level playing field for new innovations, and also of course a fair and safe environment when it comes to digital.
Commissioner Henna Virkkunen, thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.